think we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll see if Chelsea and do we know if Debbie?
Debbie told me she's coming. She was a little, yeah.
Okay. Let's see if Debbie and Chelsea. Yeah. So we'll start off. I think we'll probably start off with some introductions since we have a lot of new faces today. I think we can just go around and introduce everyone. So I think we'll start with Bryce.
We'll start, I would love to. So I am Bryce Merrill. It's great to meet y'all and be here together today. I am the Recreation and Library Director for Orem City, obviously with Char's retirement last month, ish. And so I've been with Orem for 2 years. I came from Provo City before that, from Salt Lake County before that, and from the YMCA's in Texas before that. So I've loved my time in Orem. I have loved working in the community and have had a great time. And I just could not be more excited to be here with y'all today. So yeah, any other questions or anything you'd like to have us introduce about ourselves? Or? All right.
Let's just come this way.
All right, we'll go this way. So my name's Anthony Morris. I'm one of the division managers at the library. In our library, we kind of split things in half with technical services, and that's my side. You can think of that as a lot of the backroom tasks, right? Acquiring the books, buying them, cataloging them, those kinds of things. So I'm the division manager over those kinds of processes.
So my name is Jonathan Wyeth. I go by John. I am, I guess I would say, the presumptive chair of the Library Advisory Commission. Came on about this time last year, and might have been a different time, I don't know. But it's been just over a year, and I've lived in Orem most of my life. I went to school at Geneva Elementary, and Orem Junior in Timpanogos, and I'm currently an attorney. I work for a nonprofit that's working on helping to try to build more equity and inclusion in the legal field in Utah. Just going around just introducing ourselves.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Debbie Smith. I grew up all over. I'm an Air Force brat. So, settled here in Utah with my husband. Taught at Geneva, and also taught at Greenwood, and taught school in Provo. Taught adult ed at UVU, and in Arizona, Mesa Community College. And we have 9 kids and 22 grandkids, and that's everything, I think.
I'm Katrina Lewis. We love the library. I have 3 little girls, 4, 3, and almost 2. And so we come to the library all the time. So I've been on the commission for about a year and love Orem, love the library.
I'm Lene Millet. I'm the liaison for the Library Commission from the City Council.
Okay, I'm Katrina Brittner. I am brand new here. This is my first meeting. I've lived in Orem since 1998. I have 6 children and still not done raising them, but there's a wide range. I have a couple married ones as well. And I work full-time and I love books. And years ago, I actually worked at a bookstore, so it's kind of fun for me.
I'm Sharon. I'm the office administrator in the library, so I'm the clerical support for the commission.
Mike Smith. I am the division manager over the patron services side of the library. Anthony's sort of back of house. I would be front of house. I've been with the library for almost 17 years, I believe, in one capacity or another. Anyway, glad to be here.
All right, thanks everyone. So now we're going to go ahead. Everyone got a copy in that packet of papers. The back page was a copy of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Sure, motion.
I noticed, I think Mary's trying to speak to
Oh,
us.
yeah.
No worries.
Oh, sorry, we forgot. I'm supposed to. I apologize. We skipped the Zoom.
Hey Mary, I can tell you're speaking, but we can't hear you. Let me see if that's our side.
This might be what the issue was yesterday.
Yeah.
I had problems with it at the CDBG meeting a couple nights ago too.
which does not look to be muted. Can you see Bryce? I've got my sound on. There's the.
Hello?
There we
Can
go.
you hear?
Now we can hear you now, Mary.
I apologize,
Okay,
Mary.
great,
We
thank
skipped you and Matt, so Mary, you can introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Mary Stovall Richards. I'm a retired history professor from BYU, and I've had extensive experience in libraries, not only working in a library when I was, during summers when I was at BYU, but also I have been an assistant children's librarian and a reference librarian in public libraries. And I do have one question for Bryce before we get busy. I understand you are the new library director, and I'm wondering if you have a Master of Library Science degree.
Great question. No, I do not have a Master's of Library Science degree.
Okay, do you have a special dispensation from the Utah Library Commission to be able to have your position? Because when I was in Mississippi, even to be a head reference librarian, even though I was working on a PhD at the University of Chicago, I had to have a special dispensation to be able to be a head reference librarian. And I have great concern as a member of the community about someone being for the library who does not have a Master's of Library Science degree. And since, before we get into anything else, I should say I'm very concerned about what I'm hearing about what's going on in the library. So as a member of the community, just let me give you that feedback, and I think I speak for many other people who also have many concerns about this.
I appreciate you sharing those concerns. And John, I'm glad to jump into that now. If you wanted to go through introductions, I default to you. I'm glad to take this conversation, but I'd hate to take it away.
I'll
You
just
should tell
ask
me.
though, if, what is the, .5 policy discussion? Is this something that will be discussed there, or is that something else?
Would gladly discuss it there if that would
Okay.
help the
So
flow.
I think we will get to that, Mary. I think we'll just, in order, we'll come to that when we get to the policy.
Okay, great.
Is that all right?
That's fine,
Okay.
that's fine, so long as we address it.
Okay,
May I ask who's Zoom user?
I believe that's Matt. Matt, are you in a place where you would like to introduce yourself? If not, we can move.
Okay.
If you can hear me, my name is Matt Brown. I currently teach at Orem High School and been involved in the library for a little while now. I love it, and I would like to build a connection between the high schools and the public library. That's my goal with working and learning how the council works. Sorry, I'm not there in person. I'm in New Orleans at a literacy conference, and it's a little bit crazy out where we're at right now, but I'm just gonna be listening in. So if that's all right. So that's me.
That's great. Looks like there's no snow there, so that's one thing. That's one thing you got. All right, thanks everyone. So we have the motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Aye.
Yeah, Karina.
Did you say aye?
I have to say I second.
I seconded.
And then is that it? I remember.
Yeah, I'm not a voting member, so then
Do we
just
need
the
to vote
board
on that
needs to,
then?
the commission members.
We
Okay.
need a first and a second, and Lene is not a voting member, so did we have a first and a second?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
I
Deborah
was
goes first. Sorry, Cindy second.
And then with it seconded, now we go to a yes or a no from each member. And so John, as
Okay,
you
we haven't
like.
done it in the past, but we can, so I say yay.
Yes.
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 Yes,
Yes.
Okay. All right, now we'll move on to item 3, which is election of a vice chair. So in the past, how this has worked is that we would have a chair and a vice chair. So I was the vice chair last year. And the way it had worked is that the vice chair would just be the kind of the presumptive chair for the next year. So that's kind of how it's going to. So we can continue to do that, or we can elect 2 new chair, vice chair today. We've left that. We were talking about in January, but we realized that we had new people coming on, so we decided to wait till today. So guess we can have a discussion how, if that's how we want to continue to operate, or we can think of a different way, so.
What are the responsibilities? I mean, what are your responsibilities? What's
So
the
as the
vice
chair,
chair's
like you kind of run the meeting. The meetings will be, Sharon usually makes up the agenda, and she'll call you. She called me a few days ago to see if there's any items I need to put on there. And then just like right now, I would run the meeting and ask for motions and that kind of thing. So beyond that, and then the vice chair is just kind of there in case the chair
Backup,
can't be
backup.
there. Because there was a few times when the chair was not able to make it, so. So beyond that, I don't believe there's any.
Except for presenting to the city council.
Oh, yes, and then I
September.
believe it's September, because each department or commission gets to present to the city council about what they're doing. So in September, the chair and the vice chair get to go present to the city council. So we'll all work on that together, but you'll be the chair and the vice chair will be the ones that go and actually present. And have to present and then answer questions from the council and the mayor, so.
Well, I'm good with it the way it is. The vice chair, then the next chair.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Would you like to be the vice chair, or would you like to be the vice chair? Or would mayor?
So that's the next step, is we need to
Yeah.
have a vice chair, instead of elect a vice chair.
And last time it was volunteer.
Yeah.
John volunteered, and he kind of got, yeah,
Okay.
and Amber was the one before, but she's
Amber.
transferred to a different commission.
I can do it, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Sounds good.
We need to make a
Maybe I'll
motion.
train you.
So we make a motion to have Katrina Brittner as the vice chair.
I second it.
And now we'll,
Now
now
we
we'll
call
vote.
Now we'll vote.
Yes.
So I vote yay.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Matt, how do you vote on this item?
And he's in a place where he can.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And now I believe this is, we'll turn the time over to Bryce, I think the meeting schedule changes.
Yeah, I wanted to put it to the group, this Wednesday at 6 p.m. I wanted to see, is this the only time, would we be open to a potential time change for this, as it does conflict, I'll be honest, for me personally. And so I wanted to see if that was an option, or if this was a long fought negotiation to get to this point. We could acknowledge that too, but I wanted to see if there was the ability to do that, or if we'd be comfortable with Sharon in her administrative position being able to put out a scheduling poll so we could identify another time that might work better.
Are you talking just time of the day, like Wednesday's still good? but 8 o'clock or something?
Wednesday evenings are difficult.
Okay. So I believe Charlene had set the time before, I don't know if that we had to like, I think that's what it was, like, this is the time and we're gonna meet then, so I personally am open to, if you wanna send out some kind of poll.
Survey.
Doodle
Yeah.
poll or a
Yeah.
time survey, something like that.
Yeah. And for me at least, since it is only once every other month, I think I'll be able to find time, so.
Right, we'll do that, and
That's not something we
yeah,
can go.
before May.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, now we can move into this one, policy discussion, so.
Great, well, I want to be respectful of Mary and her priorities, and so I guess maybe before I jump into this, I would love to make sure that our commission is the one leading the discussion, and we are here available to y'all as staff. And so, on policy discussion, there was a city council meeting last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, where there were several discussions about concerns, and Mary alluded to it, she, concerns about what's been happening, and so there was discussions on the library director position, on a library commission versus a library board, on state funding, on some compliance with some things. And so I don't want to presume that. We also have a lot of discussion currently surrounding a display policy that we had prepared some notes for y'all for discussion today as well. And so I guess maybe, John, if I can turn it back to you to say what's important, or does the commission want to have a discussion? How as staff can we be of service to y'all, and what questions would you like us to answer, and in what order, and
Okay.
and how can we best handle what is a tough and a charged conversation, but a really important one?
Right. So first of all, I want to understand, will the three of you be at each meeting here on out, or how will that work? Just kind of curious about the structure of this going forward.
Yeah, so typically we have it is written that the library director, which I am currently working in that role, is the one that attends, and we're able to bring other staff from the department for special reports, or obviously recognizing technical questions for either half of the library operation. We can have them invited, and we look to you if you want them invited every single time, or if we want to do it based off of the topics of the agenda, and not even just to our two division managers, but at the direction of the commission. We're here to be of use, be helpful to y'all, and so you can answer the questions you have.
And I will also say that I'm glad that we're doing this. I think these meetings were helpful and good, but I think the commission has kind of been operating on a more passive structure. Like, I know we can't set policy, but I think we can help to influence policy. Like, we haven't really been doing that, so I think this might be a good change if you're open to that. So, and I think it's good. I think we should just go around and just kind of talk about some of these issues that we do know are coming up that are of interest to the community and to ourselves. So, does anyone like to
Do we
start?
want to address Mary's concern?
So I think we can start with Mary, so I think
Yeah.
that's a good place to start.
Great. Ready for the staff, or other nuance or other angles that you'd like us to discuss, or really just, I don't have a master's degree in library sciences, and sort of start from there?
It's much broader than that, but that is indicative, I think, of the essential problem, which is the definition of what is a library. Libraries, to me, and certainly to, I would say, my generation, libraries are first and foremost repositories of learning. Certainly you have community outreach, you're sponsoring all sorts of things from story time to having concerts to having maker spaces, but all of those are based on the notion that a library is to promote learning, and it is to promote literacy, and it is to be all-inclusive for every person in that community to feel welcome in the library and to feel that they are being seen and that their concerns are being addressed. I have real problems of throwing a library under the notion of leisure activities. A library is not leisure activities. It's not soccer, it's not baseball. A library is learning, from the library at Alexandria to the present. It's a very different animal. And I think this whole notion of the way the thing is structured, having somebody who doesn't understand libraries as the director of the library, is a very concerning thing for me, and I think for many members of the public who understand what a library is.
I think along those lines too, I'm just curious, they do seem very divergent, rec department and library, just on its face. So I'm having a hard time too seeing how those two things go together. So I don't know if there's anyone else.
Is the library director more of a management type of thing rather than actual production, I guess? You know, I've been in aviation for 28 years, and a lot of our CEOs and our presidents are not necessarily guys that have ever worked out on the floor, but their experience is in management of people and processes, and they typically have an eye for, looking for efficiencies or waste and things like that. So I guess my thought is, if this is a position similar to that in what I do, you know, in the aviation world is, it doesn't necessarily need to be someone who, you know, maybe knows all the technical stuff like Anthony does, or all the front-facing stuff that Mike does, but he can work as a whole. So that's, I'm just asking if that's kind of how this position is to be seen and how it's supposed to function. I'm new, just asking.
I like what you said, yeah. And in my opinion, degrees can be a little overrated sometimes. I think you can get a lot of learning. I think you can learn a lot of things without getting a degree. And you can be very educated in many areas, even if you have a degree in one field. You can become educated and branch out into other areas as well, I believe. And management is an important skill. And I can see a connection between recreation and library. The library sponsors a lot of events. The library sponsors a lot of activities in their auditorium and in many other places as well. So I can see a connection.
Beth Haynes.
Sorry, Beth.
Anything else? And I hopefully jotted a few notes and sort of glad to go one by one. And
Let me just add that someone who is skilled in management is certainly needed, but the person who is managing needs to understand what they are managing. And a library needs specially skilled people who are trained. And I'm sorry if people are disdaining degrees, but quite frankly, I think degrees are important because people need to know what they're talking about. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then it's very easy to get misled about things. There's a reason why we have people going through school and getting credentials saying, I understand what this is about. And this is not something that you just walk in off the street and say, I'm going to run a library. You actually need to know something about it.
Any discussion? I think we can.
Great.
Your response.
And I'll try to go through these. I also don't want to like barrel through 12 questions and then not give it a chance for conversation. I think the commission works really well if we have a chance for conversation. So I also hope to present this in a way that is not defensive. I invite the conversation, and if you were at the council meeting, I'll echo what I said there. I think passionate people who want to defend the library are exactly what the library needs. And so Mary, I'll speak specifically to you. Thank you for being the one to bring it up and to share the feedback. I think that's really useful, and it gives us a chance to have this discussion. And I'll be honest, to start the discussion, I don't think we'll allay the concerns in a few minutes tonight, but I hope that as you and I have the opportunity to work together, we'll earn that trust, and we'll find ways to sort of grow together. That's why we have commissions, that's why we have staff, that's why we have council, that's why we have residents, is I think we'll get the best answer by working together. So no, my degree is a degree in the humanities with an emphasis in theater and media art. I got that from BYU in 2008. It is not a technical degree in library sciences. It is a liberal arts degree, and so cast your judgment on that as you will. It is a degree that I love and cherish, and I'm grateful that I had that experience in my undergrad degree. But I also would not pretend that that is enough to satisfy, that's why they have a master's degree in library sciences. Yes, I think to Katrina's point, when this assignment was made to me to run these two departments, I think it's good to clarify, the departments are not combining. There is no recreation dollars in library or library dollars in recreation. It is a director that is helping to manage both separate departments in the city. I consider other positions like our public works director, who has charge over park maintenance and fleet and sewer and so many diverse fields that have very different needs and all of that. That department director serves in a management capacity and less in the day-to-day operations. They have incredibly talented staff that are in each of those positions. As I met with our city manager and received this assignment, I think that was what was laid out, was that we have an incredibly talented staff, dozens of full-time librarians that are trained, and that the position would be asked to help align some of the goals and the vision, to look for opportunities to invite more people in, or to take some of the strategies we've used to get more people involved in a fitness center and see what we can do to use the expertise of our library staff and see what we can do to encourage more people to use the services at the library. There are opportunities for efficiency or experience design or creativity, elements of my field and my experience that have a lot of applicability. There is not a lot of overlap with repositories of knowledge and recreation. We focus a lot on the experience, on what a person wants to achieve through community or through habit or through learning and fitness and nutrition and some of those things. And so there are absolutely differences. These are not identical, but I think when I took a chance to try to organize these two departments and the two diverse teams and the diverse groups of citizens that we serve, I think there's a lot that will make sense for a unified strategy and a unified form of management. And then where those areas of expertise or specificity diverge, we'll be able to rely on two technical division managers who have years and decades of experience in library. We have, again, over 30 full-time librarians that are managing our current library. That is a large and talented and qualified staff that will be doing the day-to-day operations. And so I think we'll see a learning curve of how do we have our technical staff learn to coalesce with a recreation and library director and how we can support each other. There is a language of learning for both of us right now. I think it's important to know that the previous library director was also not someone with a master's in library sciences. They came from the public administration world, and so I think we saw a lot of the success we've seen in the last decade from a similar model here. That's not to discredit the degree, that's not to discredit the experience, but I think it is something that we have seen a relative amount of success with, and that's one that we can hope to build on. Is this more of a management type of thing? What is the position to be overseeing? I think we've mentioned a little bit of that, but we have a chance to work with some of what we call the city council areas of focus. And so we've been provided this year 6 directives for safe and livable neighborhoods and community outreach and all of that. And so again, I think that's one of the things where I will work deeply in the budget and in our staff management and in training and metrics or diversity of collections and policy refinement to say how can we make sure that we're meeting the needs of our city manager and of our city council and of our staff, all 3 of whom are working really, really hard to meet the needs of our residents. So I think that's where a lot of my time will be spent, is working on some of those elements of the library, and we'll rely, of course, on our 2 division managers and our 30 full-time staff to take care of a lot of the technical aspects and everything like that. I guess maybe in conclusion, before I turn it back to y'all for maybe follow-up questions or additional discussion, is that I think your concerns are noted and heard. I think they are shared by staff, as we've had several dozen staff meetings the last month. I think we've had a lot of the same questions to say, what do you need from a non-technical director, and how can I serve y'all? How can my experience in budget and management and vision and policy creation benefit y'all and represent the interests of our librarians and of our library patrons? And where do we see a gap, and how can we address some of those gaps? And so I think it'll be important for us to hear a little bit about that and to work with our technical division managers as well as our library and recreation director. I'm hopeful that it will help us achieve new things and see things in a new way and get to a new higher level. And I think, again, the concerns that have been shared are are really good, so that we remain very accountable and very connected to those concerns of residents and staff, and see what we can do to go from there. So I think with that, I'd like to turn it back over to John or the commission for additional questions or clarifications.
Well, one clarification I want to know is just like on a day-to-day level, you can't be at both places at once. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So if you're over on the rec side, and there's things that need to be done, and the library side, that normally would have been done by you, like whose responsibility is that now? And are those responsibilities falling on people that are getting compensated for that extra workload? That's what I'm kind of concerned about. Like, are there some of those responsibilities that maybe would have fallen on you if you were a full-time library director now being pushed onto other people that is beyond what they've been asked to do before? And maybe Anthony and Mike might be able to address it too, as far as they've been seeing.
I'll maybe take the first half of that, and then I can turn it over to y'all. You know, I think from what the job I currently do in recreation, we have a senior center that is located on the city center block. We have a rec center that is located, 2 miles away. We have 19 ball fields and soccer fields that have our full-time staff at that. And so the nature of management in 2023 in a city with as strong and robust of programming as Orem is managing beyond proximity. And so we are regularly required. I go back to my colleagues on the city's executive staff team, and each of us are operating and managing in ways where we are not at the wastewater treatment plant and the sewer and on the streets crews on a regular basis. And so I think it does look to our leaders to say, how do we do this effectively? How do we make sure things aren't falling through the cracks and everything like that? I also look at the number of what we would consider executive staff meetings that Shar and I used to attend together. And so if you take all of those, and we now have one person that can be there and communicate to both teams at the same time, and then you take the remaining time and divide it out, hopefully we are talking about a few hours of direct report hour work per week. That is being divided, there's no way around that, but hopefully it's not 40 hours. You know, let's say if my time were to be split 20 and 20, but 10 of those were Shar and I attending together, now we're splitting 15 and 15, and through some efficiencies, maybe we're down to 12 and 12, and those are the 12 hours that we look to Mike and Anthony and their teams to then divide up. And so hopefully it gets to a workable number for a staff of 30 full-timers to look at what does 8 to 10 to 12 hours a week look like divided up, and is that fair within their compensation range? To be determined from my perspective. I think it's the fair question, and it's something that requires our regular quarterly staff interviews and everything like that to really determine. But maybe I'd invite, sorry, and I'm sitting right next to you, I know that's an awkward environment to provide that, but hopefully an honest discussion like what we've been having the last several weeks for the commission, yeah.
I would echo one thing that Bryce said, that we are still feeling out what that is, right? That Charlene only retired a month ago, and of course it's different, right? Charlene was in her office and working with us for a full-time job. Bryce is splitting his time. I have really liked working with Bryce. I'm really encouraged by the things he's said, the way he's working with us. Those are all encouraging things. But it is also just really early to be able to get a feel for when you change a position as important as library director, you need more time than just a month to really understand what that feels like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. In the past, I don't know, a few years, we've been experiencing a few staffing changes at the library, through retirements. It's kind of, it goes in waves, right? And during those times, we've taken opportunities to kind of relook or reevaluate, like how we are distributing our staff resources, and if there's an opportunity to make a change, in a work section or a reference area, or just how we manage our staff. I would compare it to this. This is a chance for us to step back and kind of reevaluate, kind of going along with some of the city council's goals for the coming year, looking at efficiencies and things that we can look at ourselves and see, like, is there something maybe we could do a little bit better? And so yeah, while it is early on, I do feel it's an opportunity to kind of look inward and see what we can do
be better. Any other comments or discussion on this point? I guess we can move on to other policy discussions. Did you have any that you had lined up, or this is a chance just for us to bring those forward?
Yeah, I would be glad. Again, I know, and to go back to Mary, I don't want to gloss over, she mentioned a couple things that she was concerned about. And so I turn it back to y'all. I have some discussion topics on displays at the library, a series of newspaper articles and letters and a lot of thought and work from this side of the table the last month to get that organized. So I can speak to that, but again, I want to make sure I'm answering a question that y'all are asking, or there's not something else that you'd rather I be talking about. So
Yeah, so before we return to Bryce, is there any other topics that are top of mind for any on the commission you'd like to discuss before we move on to Bryce's topics?
Mary?
I have just one other question, which is, what is the genesis of this change? Where did it originate? I don't get a local paper, I get the Salt Lake Tribune, but I didn't see anything coming out from the city council saying that this was going to be discussed in a meeting, so I want to know what the genesis of it is. Why did someone decide that putting these two entities together was a good idea, and who decided that?
great question. So the shortest answer is our acting city manager, Brent Bybee, made a series of 3 specific changes to the executive staff team for the city of Orem. And so I think it's important to note in the context, this was not a library decision. Obviously, it affected the library, but there were 3 members of the exec staff. We went from a team of 12 to a team of 9. And so 2 of those positions were in the city manager's office, and 1 was the recreation and library position. And so that was the genesis. There is an article, if you have the Daily Herald, there's a couple of articles that talks about the Department of Management Services, and then the combining of the director to be over the library and recreation departments, and then the Development Services Director serving as the acting assistant city manager. And so those were the 3 positions. Again, I know the discussion today is about library and recreation, but I think the genesis, to your point, Mary, was the exec staff team was at 12, and it was decided to have that team serve at 9. Did that answer your question, or any other follow-ups on it?
No, so you're basically streamlining things, so you have eliminated 3 positions, is that correct?
I
Or
believe,
the city council, or the city manager has eliminated 3 positions?
yeah, the city manager took the exec staff team from 12 to 9. And again, there were, I don't want to simplify because there were several changes. A deputy city recorder became a city events coordinator. And they, an office executive assistant staff became an analyst position. So there were several changes that were outlined. Again, not to diminish the impact to this group specifically on the library and recreation director being a single person, but I think the context is maybe helpful in identifying, like Mary said, a streamlining effort or an efficiency effort in the city's leadership staff to what is, through analysis or through the city manager's process, is a more suitable staff organization.
Thank you.
Right, well, displays?
Yeah.
Yes.
Displays, all right. Pull up my notes here really quick. And just for context, are we generally familiar with what was discussed at the council meeting, or should we recap from the start? I'm glad to do either.
I'm not aware of the council meeting. I know the other stuff before that,
Okay.
but not the actual council meeting.
Good. Well, good. Well, I will speak then sort of from the beginning. 4 weeks ago, when we stepped into this position, this was priority 1 for us. We know that this was a topic that needed to be addressed, and Anthony and Mike and I, and Sharon, we have spent a lot of time on a display policy. I'd also like to recognize the time that our council member liaison, Lene Millett, has spent on this, and we have seen this from the city manager's office. We have seen this from a lot of places, that this is priority one, to do the work that is necessary to get back to a healthy environment where we can have displays of lots of different types and everything like that. So I want to walk you through a little bit of the process of the last month, where we're at now and what our next steps are, and what a timeline looks like, so that our staff, our residents, can anticipate what this is going to look like. First off, we start with an inventory of displays, and we want to say, what are our staff asked to do when making these decisions to say what's a display and what's not a display? And if you were like me, you had seen pictures in the newspaper, or you would walk by a table and said, that's a display. But then we started to inventory and say, there's a lot of choices that a staff make. And so maybe you have a cover out area of your stacks where typically there's spine out, and now we choose 4 books to go cover out. Maybe it's an end cap display where we take, we're at the end of the 700s and we take these 4 books and say, we want to just put these books out. We like their covers, or it's a brand new one, or something like that. Maybe it's the top of the stack, specifically in the children's section, where it's like, those are really visual. You can see them from across the library. Each of those are not a full display, but items and decisions are being made by staff members of various levels of authority or responsibility to choose to highlight information. Maybe it's akin to merchandising and how we choose to push stuff in a storefront. Maybe it's akin to this repository of knowledge that we are highlighting certain elements through the physical layout of the library. Maybe it's our online resources where we have a book list and librarians are choosing books to be included on that list. That could be considered a form of display. And so as we did this, we recognized that we had about 150 different locations in the library. Locations, digital, physical, online, apps, posters, handouts. And as we considered the number of iterations of those, we were approaching well over 4,000 per year. 4,000 decisions, and not 4,000 books, but 4,000 times they went through and chose which books go on top and which books are included. And so I mention that because I think the scope of the policy, or the scope of the what needs to be discussed, should be reflective of how many different places that is, and how the different impacts and the different weight and the different duration of those comes into play. So that's why we wanted to focus on a policy that matched that had the requisite nuance to reflect each of those things. I'm going to put Anthony on the spot here really quick. You have a collection development policy. Can you give us the 30-second overview? And I believe that was taken to the Library Advisory Commission 4 years ago?
I think, yeah.
3?
Yes, I know for sure 5 and 3 years ago. I thought maybe in 2021 you all saw it. Does that sound familiar? Yes, no? This is a great reason for, me to occasionally attend these meetings. I'll remember the last time you've seen it. The 30-second version of the collection development policy is it is the policy that describes why we get the books and materials that we do. Because filling a library with the materials is a monumental effort, right? It takes many hands, it takes a lot of minds. The development policy briefly describes how those decisions are made. And we have a 2-page version, which is available both as a guiding document for staff, but also to give to any person in the public who's curious. Why are you choosing these books? And it briefly outlines the kinds of criteria that we would look at in order to include something in the collection. Those criteria include things that like, is it an item that contributes to our general knowledge? Is it educational in some way? Would it be interesting to our community as it is, right? A library looks to both represent our general knowledge, right, in an educational fashion, but also looks to directly serve the community it's in. That we are very interested in our patrons, in the Orem citizens, right? What are the kinds of collections they want? And so there's your 30-second version, right? The descriptive document that explains why we get the things we do. Why do we have these books? Why do we have these movies? That is the description of how we get there.
That document served as the structural basis to say, now how do we choose? We look to Mike's team to say, how do we choose the, how many, hundreds of thousands of items? Hundreds of thousands of items.
A third of a million,
Yes.
yeah, 300,000 items.
Hundreds of thousands of items, which ones get to be put out when, where, and why? And what is the messaging attached to that? The voice of the Orem Public Library is an important voice, and it should somehow represent the fabric of every staff member and the city and the Library Advisory Commission, and and maybe to what Mary shared earlier, that it should include the message that this is Orem, or you are welcome, or. And to get all of those into a unified message is, you call it a monumental task. I think the voice of Orem Public Library is one that is deserving of thought. How do we have the voice? And so, again, we have this policy, we go through, we do the inventory, the types, the places, the locations, the topics that we do, how do we control not control, how do we shape the messaging in a way that is a fair representation of everything that we do. So now we come to a policy. It's similar to this, and it's still in draft format. And what I can commit to y'all today is a discussion on where we're at now and next steps while we finalize and have this policy in place. I would hope by the end of this month, 3.5 weeks from now. We're close, but we're not quite there yet. And that's something that can be shared with y'all digitally as we get to a more final stage of what we're trying to do. But what we did is we created a matrix, 19 different rows that said, this is the type of material being displayed, these are the potential locations of it, these are the potential types of topics that could be covered in that display, and then this is who would help ideate it. Let's talk about cultural celebrations. Who gets to choose the cultural celebrations that we do? That's deserving of its own conversation. Who gets to then curate the books associated with that cultural celebration? Who gets to decide the location of that celebration or the duration of time for that celebration? Who gets to decide the mode that we put? Is this a bookmark that has a book list? Is this a program that we put on in Library Hall? Is this a stack top? Is this a display with signage? And so this matrix that we have spent a lot of time developing, and this is where the three of us are able to argue, I lean heavily on the technical expertise of our staff, but also the, hey, we've got square pegs and round holes, let's argue, let's talk about this, let's get these in the right spot. And so that's what we're building right now. I wanted to take y'all through a couple of examples of something that we have and something we're working on. First off, is we have 4 main displays, tabletop, treetop, beehive displays that have books. When you have something like this, it might make sense for us to identify one of those as a cultural heritage display. And so we go through and say, let's talk about the different groups and minority voices and fabric of Orem, representation of Orem voices that would be fun to do. We want to work from an abundance mindset, not we don't want that voice or that voice. Instead, we want to say, we just said we have 4,000 iterations annually. That's a lot of yeses. And we would love to work from a place of, we'd love to, with rare exception, that's something we'd love to talk about. That's fun. Maybe it's a book list, maybe something. But we create a portal where people can say, hey, I'd like to talk about this. It's not going to be perfect in year 1, but we build right into the policy a way to iterate that. So this year we did Native American Heritage Month. And the next year we say, actually, as we're learning more about Utah, we know that there's 8 First Nation peoples that inhabited Utah. How can we highlight the 8 different cultures instead of a homogeneous one culture? Now we have a better 2024 plan to say, hey, we might have to do this differently, but that's something we want to do. We think that would be a really fun way to do that. Or we come in and say, hey, this year we have the Black History Museum bus, and that was something that was coordinated this past February. Let's recognize that as a really cool thing, and how does that change the balance of what we do in a book display or a cultural display? Do we have critical momentum that we can attach to that to say, because we did this, people are really interested, maybe this is why we can do a display? Or perhaps we say, we had several places of representation in February for that Cultural Heritage Month. Here's one that we didn't get as much attention for, so we'd like to balance it out. In theory, though, from the place we're at now, we start from an abundance mindset. We can say yes to a lot of different things to have those represented. Another one is a topical approach. Have we followed the Utah state flag, the new flag coming in, right? Controversial and exciting, and there's a lot of opinions on it. That cues us in to say that might make for a really fun topical display. So we could build out a display for a couple of months saying, let's talk about the Orem state flag, the Utah state flag. And so you have a display that could cover vexillology, it could cover the 8 native tribes, it could cover the beehive, and we could get into apiary sciences and beekeeping as a hobby. We could talk about the red, white, and blue that they used, the US flags, red, white, and blues, we could have something on that. We could have something on the beehive and represents the cultural heritage of the state and how it was founded. We have one display. Our librarians get a lot of professional purview to be great librarians and say, here's the topic, have fun. How do we make this exciting? How do we pull our residents in? How do we get them talking and reading books? And so one display, lots of really cool directions it could go. As a library advisory commission or as citizens, we say, let's talk about the flag. As an administrative staff team and as where the buck will stop, which will be me, we can say what's the appropriate weight, what's the appropriate location, what's the appropriate balance. And then our librarians get a lot of professional purview to then execute the vision of that type of display. We want to create that for our professional experts with this level of guidance and input from an administrative staff team, from a library advisory commission. The last sort of thought I have on it is that it is not meant to be perfect on day one. It's meant to say, how do we build in, similar to our collection development policy, how do we build in the iterative nature of a good policy? Instead of saying, the policy was bad because we sort of, Bryce, we messed up this display, or we put out that display on sweater vests and not a single book was checked out. It was an absolute dud. What a swing and a miss. And so instead of saying the policy is bad, we'd say the policy has this cycle built into it to say, Katrina, you brought up concerns about sweater vests. Here's how to escalate that concern. Here's who to bring it to. Here's who you can talk to about that. I think given that we're an advisory commission, we would never want to say, that was John's decision, you're going to want to take that up with him. I think we want to say, how do we contribute and have this be representative, but ultimately it can come to the staff that are making those decisions. So we have an iterative policy that is from an abundance mindset. We say yes to a lot of great things. We get them in the right locations with the right weight, and we go from there. So displays that cover cultural heritage, displays that cover topics of interest. We think it'd be really fun to have a display that covers like Orem, like sort of an evergreen display. The topics and the curation is different, but if you want to talk about mountains or hydrology, or you want to talk about, hey, we've got a great future city council meeting coming up and everyone's talking about schools. Great, so let's have books about schools, or we're in a drought, or we're in a flood. Great, we can put that out so we can have one that's evergreen to Orem topics. So that is currently where we're at. That's where the policy is at. Our hope is that we refine the final specifics, build in these mechanics, and get that to y'all and to our staff in the next couple of weeks for a review period and some pushing and some pulling and some stress testing. And then we get into a sort of a beta testing phase in April with a couple of these, maybe physically having to build new displays or pick the locations that will become the sort of the forever homes of certain types of displays. And then we fill out the policy for the 2023-2024 calendar year, and we have something that works long term, and that's the hope. That's the goal and the hope right now. So I'll maybe turn it over to y'all, saying it's not done. We might not have specifics, but what questions came to your mind that we can make sure that we really try to dial in as we continue to refine it?
I would say I like the approach of the abundance. We come from a place of abundance. There are so many things that we could really push and create interest and not get in a rut. Sometimes I feel like that is what I've seen in the past. Well, I know if I'm walking in on this day, I know exactly what I'm going to see. It's going to be it's this month, so it's gonna be this display. So yeah, have a little creativity and, yeah. I wanna read about sweater vests now. So,
Attacked right
Yeah.
I thought my sweater display was
like
fine,
it.
guys.
That's great.
that's why I'm like, Anthony, I'm excited about that. How did that start? So, I appreciate that approach. I think that's a good way to start.
Do we have a way for our patrons to leave comments or maybe reviews about what they're seeing so that we can take that into consideration? Because I know that's been a big concern, patrons feeling like they don't have enough input. So,
Love it, yes, we would build a mechanic in to say we love the feedback. We
right.
didn't want to do like a vote.
No,
You know, or-
I'm not saying that.
Exactly, but to say, hey, leave your thoughts, and
Yeah.
maybe it's as simple as saying, hey, I know you're doing Pacific Islander Heritage Months, but
Right.
really we feel like this needs to be 4 separate as we get into Samoan and Tongan and Fijian.
Right,
You know, that's the kind of feedback we would love to say, what a great perspective, let's do it, as opposed to, hey, everyone, hey, sweater vests club, everyone weigh in because we're doing the votes for next year's display right now.
right.
That doesn't feel as productive, but yes, I
Yeah.
would love to hear that feedback and create the dialogue with them to
Right.
say, yeah, tell me more about that, and how do we foster a conversation rather than a yes or no vote?
Right.
I like that too, because just, like, what is a more constructive way for people to
Right,
leave feedback
exactly.
where it's not just turning to social media and newspaper,
Right.
which is helpful, but it also can lead to,
Lacks nuance, maybe.
lack of nuance at times. With this idea of abundance, but I'm just worried about who gets to say what's off limits. I know the flashpoint where this all kind of started was pride, which I know is controversial to some people, but also can be life-changing and even life-saving for some people
Yeah.
to have that representation. So I just want to know, like, who is making those calls and who gets to decide, like, no, we don't do that here. So.
Great question. And maybe one of the points we have gone back and forth the longest on, because I think at the end of the day, staff are paid to do a job, and so for us to be the focus point of that feels more appropriate than a resident or a commission or one voice or anything like that. And so we ended with, ultimately, the library director will be responsible for the final schedule, location, the matrix itself.
Mhm.
And with input, as much as we say that, but you're right, ultimately we have to say who is responsible for this. And I think some of the concerns from the last year resulted in a, fingers pointing at the person, not to avoid blame, but just, we didn't have a policy.
Right.
This will write the who iterated, who curated, who approved, who do I talk to about next year being different, better, bigger, more or less, different topic. And it'll clarify each of those lanes so that, again, our staff feel supported and protected. I told Mike, our brand new assistant librarian, associate librarian, hey, you can make this display, here's your topic, we trust you and your judgment. We'll have that written in there and how that approved so that even the staff that do make it don't feel like, am I responsible for this, am I wrong? We want to build that professional purview in for the curators, for the ideators, and for the approvers.
Well, and locations come into play there too, because I would imagine if you're kind of picking something, that's not going to be at every 150 display locations.
Right.
And there will be some places that will be appropriate for certain things and maybe not as appropriate in other locations.
One other message point I forgot to emphasize. We talked a little bit about the third person voice of Orem Public Library. And we would work on curating a consistent message for that. So instead of saying, because we had talked about like the word celebrate, but then how do you have a topic like we're covering the Vietnam War? It's like, we're celebrating the Vietnam War, and that's like, oh, celebrations no longer work. And so we thought something as simple as your Orem neighbors are reading about Vietnam War,
Mhm.
June Pride Month, cooking with your garden vegetables, Caldecott Award winners. Like, so your Orem Neighbors Are Reading About allows us to more adeptly move through different types of topics and different temperatures on topics. We're letting the books do the talking and the convincing and the messaging, and the library is doing the displays to help create that space. And it's really, really consistent and as neutral as possible. The library itself doesn't have opinions on these. We provide that repository of opinions and knowledge and perspectives that allow the reader and the author to make that connection.
We're at an hour. Is there any other topics? I know there's the one about the board, commission. That's something you want to go over today, or?
I can give the really quick recap on that one. And if I could also invite y'all, the city council meeting from last Tuesday is online, and our city attorney, Steve Earle, goes through the code there. And I think maybe the best thing I can say as not a lawyer is go listen to the lawyer. But essentially, there is a funding mechanism in place that was not referenced for people who had concerns about that. And since we don't use that funding mechanism, the board versus commission does not come into play. The appointment of staff does not come into play. Some of the regulations that were listed does not come into play. If we had a mill rate or a specific library tax, state code would say X, Y, and Z, but since we don't, we use money from the general fund, it's not applicable. We're more applicable to chapter 10 instead of chapter 7.
Okay, that makes more sense. 'Cause I read it too, and I was confused. Just reading the one, it felt like we needed to have a board. But if there's a second whole section that maybe was in a footnote to a footnote or.
That was our reaction too, which is why we then immediately went to our lawyer to say, interpret this for us.
We have no interest in not being compliant.
Yeah.
I think there was a second group of, or a second like subsection of concerns. Hey, according to the Utah State Library, here's some recommendations and criteria. Those are recommendations for recertification each year, and recertification only applies to cities of under 50,000. And so, same thing, most of the concerns about it were related back to the library board versus commission but even if they weren't, those are applicable to cities of under 50,000, and Orem is just over 100,000, so we are exempt from those as well. In terms of the CLEF grants and some of the other state funds that are available. We are currently certified, and we have no need to apply. We do not feel that there is any concern about those funds no longer being available to our library or a loss of resources or anything like that.
Okay. I trust our city attorney knows more about municipal code than most of us.
But know that this team is very interested in being compliant, following state code, and so we were glad the concerns were brought up so we could seek out that clarification, and as we learn more, we are happy to comply and iterate and improve and do what we need to do.
And may I just say, go to the YouTube, Orem City Council YouTube channel. Look at it's at the beginning of you have to go through because the work session is there first, go to 6 p.m. when the actual city council meeting starts. And Bryce does a wonderful job of explaining things, our city attorney does a wonderful job, our city manager, Brett Bybee, and Mary Young also addresses a lot of the accusations made in the media reports that were unfounded. So, I would encourage you, especially as commission members, to make sure that you watch that, because it's just hard to distinguish when you hear so many things said. So that's where the information is.
I guess before we move on, is there any other points of policy issues or discussion that we'd like to cover before? And beyond that, is there any other just library-focused topics that we need to cover before we adjourn? I guess my one thing is, do we have any updates about the adult reading challenge? What kind of engagement we have on that? Do we know at this point?
I don't have any hard numbers right now. I know that it's quite popular.
Okay.
And that was one thing that, results-based kind of decision-making, right? A lot of feedback that we received from other reading challenges, other, reading programs that we've done. And the feedback was always, this is so fun that I'm here doing with my kids. Is there one for adults that I could do just for me? And so that's kind of the reason for that. We will try and prepare some numbers for you next time, let you know. But I do know that it's incredibly popular.
Okay. I guess at that point we'll be ramping up for the
Yeah.
summer kids reading challenge.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will say, it might be relative, right, because it's a new program, so the numbers might be kind of like, okay, I don't know what that means.
Right.
But it sounds like a lot, or not. But yeah, the feedback is great. It's been a long time coming. We're excited to do it because, we're readers too, and most of us are adults or try to read. And so it's fun to engage with the public like that and just have fun with it.
Okay. I guess Bryce, do you have anything else before we?
No.
Okay. I make a motion to, or do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
We have to vote on that.
No, not for that.
Okay.
Just kidding.
No.
Yeah.
No, we don't. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, all of you, for your work in the library. Appreciate it, and those of you serving in this commission, appreciate your time.
Thank you.